Okay, we're at a, where are we? Suemori-jo, the site of Suemori Castle. Alright, which is unrelated to the story we'll be reading this week, but I'm going to walk around the site of this, I think it's a Shinto shrine too, in this castle, as we, as I explain the study guide for Mori Ōgai's The Dancing Girl, or Maihime, the great work published in 1890, written in a sort of pseudo-classical style. So you will have the English translation and the original. So read both. Read the original to the extent possible if you're a foreigner. Read the English translation to the extent possible if you're a Japanese student. Okay, Mori Ōgai, the introduction to the author himself. I gave a short introduction in another video that I made the other day, so I don't need to repeat that. Refer to that. The description is in this at the start of the study guide. So I'm going to jump straight into the questions about Maihime, translated as the dancing girl. Okay. Number 1, discuss the narrative structure. Where, temporally and spatially, is the narrating I? Okay. Why and what is he writing? Is he an example of a self-conscious narrator? Okay. So basically, what is it? How much distance is there, temporal and spatial distance, between the narrator now, in the narrative present, and the events that he's describing from his past? Okay. What does this distance sort of create? Number 2, describe the narrator, his position, his background, his education, his motivations and desires, priorities, concerns, struggles, talents, interests, behaviors, and personality, etc. Alright, we're going to have to pause. Some people are showing up here. Number 3. What examples of foreshadowing can you find in the work? Okay, and there are several. In the beginning of the work, he hints at things that are to come later in the work. For example, the unwritten notebooks. He mentions some hidden remorse that he feels about what has happened, what has transpired, and we of course don't find out what has transpired until later. But identify all these instances of foreshadowing that appear. Number 4, make a list of all the cultural and historical references that appear. Alright, and most of the story takes place in Germany, so there are a lot of references to King Ludwig and German sites and whatnot. Make a list of these as they appear. Number 5, how does Ota Toyotaro describe the city scene on his first day in Berlin? Why does he try to keep himself from being moved by the various sights? Okay. Number 6, describe the real, quote-unquote, real self that Ota feels emerging inside of him. How is this quote-unquote real self different from his quote-unquote former assumed self? Does this true nature prove to be an illusion? Alright, keep in mind that the idea of one's true nature, your true self, true individual, doesn't emerge until the Meiji period, right? So the narrator is writing, he views the world and reads the world through the lens of these Western concepts and Western ideas that have just come into Japan in the last few decades, right? So keep that in mind as you answer that question. Number 7, how is Ota regarded and treated by his Japanese peers? Okay. Is there some sort of tension or distance between them? Number 8, describe Ota's view of and relations with women prior to his encounter with Elise. Okay. So there are several passages from the story that tell you about his previous experiences with women. Number 9, describe Elise, the main female character, the dancing girl, the Maihime. Okay, discuss her circumstances, her background, her predicament, her behavior, and so forth. In what state is she in when Ota discovers her? How does she react to him at first? Why does the narrator describe dancing as a disreputable trade? Okay, so today we think of dancing as in terms of ballet and sort of high society and whatnot. But in 1890 in Germany, late 1880s in Germany, being a dancer had different associations. What are those associations? Number 10, do you perceive any hints of anti-Japanese or anti-Asian racism in the work? Explain. Okay, and of course the Western world is rife with anti-Asian and anti-Japanese and anti-Chinese sentiment in both Europe and America at the time. And all of the Japanese young elite students who traveled and studied in Europe and America experienced some sort of racism while they were there. And you see hints of it in this story too. Identify those hints, those passages, and explain them. Number 12. Why is Ota's position terminated? What is the content of the 2 letters he receives? Alright, so he's sent to Germany, but his position is terminated at some point. What is the reason for this? Okay, straightforward question. Number 13. Describe the evolving stages of Ota and Elise's relationship. Okay, so the relationship can be divided into several stages. I forget how many, but when I read it, I think I divided into 3 or 4 stages. What are those stages, and explain them. Number 14. How does Ota's friend Aizawa Kenkichi help him? Okay, this is one of the other main characters who appears in the work to help Ota at some point. How does he help him? Number 15. Describe Ota and Elise's life when they are living together. Okay, so they start to live together at one point. Describe their relationship. How does it change after they begin living together? How does Ota himself change during this period? What new interests and skills does he require? Okay, number 16. How does Ota's luck change starting in the winter of 1888? What are the sources of his anxiety during this period? What advice does he receive from Aizawa Kenkichi after confiding in him? How does Ota take the advice? Okay, another straightforward question about the plot. Number 17. Describe Ota's trip to Russia. Okay, so at some point he makes a trip to Russia in the work. Describe the nature of the letters he receives from Elise while in Russia. Okay, so he's in Russia and they're continuing to correspond by letters, and what is the content of those letters? How is her attitude reflected in those, or her state of mind rather, reflected in those letters? Number 18. Discuss the meaning and significance of the following sentence. Okay. With Aizawa's help, she had not wanted for daily necessities. It was true. But this same benefactor had spiritually killed her. Okay? So, and I have the original Japanese written below that. So yes, discuss the significance of that sentence, which is an important sentence in the work. Number 19. Describe Elise's metamorphosis. What causes it? Her sort of change in the course of the story. What causes this metamorphosis? Is it believable under such circumstances? What are the quote-unquote urtexts? Urtexts is a word I like to use a lot. It means basically precursor texts, or already pre-existing stories that the author sort of incorporates either consciously or unconsciously into his work and sort of lays his story or her story over these already existing tropes and archetypes and narratives and so forth. So do you sense any urtext behind this story? Who are Elise's literary models, right? And what was the quote-unquote something that she was looking for? Okay. Number 20, discuss the ethical problems and implications of the work. How grave was Ota's crime? Okay, he refers to what he has done as a crime at some point. How grave and serious is the crime he has committed? Is Ota's behavior, decision, course of action ethically defensible? Was there another, more ethical option? If so, what? Okay, so in general it's good to avoid sort of ethically judging or condemning characters in works of literature, but in this question I explicitly ask you to do so. Okay, so assess the ethical ramifications and ethical content of what he has done. Number 21. Okay, discuss the significance of the famous last sentence. Okay, this sentence is often quoted in studies of Mori Ōgai and papers about Maihime. Friends like Aizawa Kenkichi are rare indeed, and yet to this very day there remains a part of me that curses him. Okay, so explain this sort of ambiguous or conflicting feelings that the narrator has and still has toward Aizawa Kenkichi, and analyze that ambiguity. Alright, and then so there's 21 questions, a lot of questions, and most of them are fairly straightforward questions about plot or interpretation of motivations and that sort of thing. And then after those questions I have 5 further discussion questions that are more general and abstract in nature. So if you would like to substitute some of these for the previous questions, you can do so. Alright, so for example, you replace further discussion question number 4 and answer that instead of one of the original 21 questions. So number 1 of further discussion questions: what is the main conflict of the story? Is this a moral story about the tension between Giri and Ninjo, as some critics have described it? I think I mentioned in another video that when foreign scholars, Western scholars, first started writing about Japanese literature, they would invariably talk about this tension, this conflict between Giri and Ninjo, which they described as sort of exclusively Japanese in nature. But these, of course, this tension between Giri or duty and Ninjo or human feelings and emotions and erotic attachments and all those sorts of things is common tension or common dichotomy in all of world literature, of course. But it appears in this story too. To what extent is this story a moral story about the tension between these two motivations of human behavior, Giri and Ninjo? Number 2, why did Ōgai use the pseudo-classical style, Gikobun or Gabun, or in another video I described it as Gazoku Setchu, a mix of Ga and Zoku, rather than the modern colloquial style Genbun Ichi, to write this story? And one reason, of course, is this work was written in 1889, 1890, before Genbun Ichi had become established, right? So writers in 1889, 1890 still had options to either write in the modern sort of style that was being used in newspapers, or to write in this more self-consciously literary old style, right? So why is this work written in this pseudo-classical style? Alright, speculate on this question. Number 3. Why has the work been read as an autobiography, or a roman à clef in Japan? Roman à clef is, of course, a French term that means a novel, a key novel, a novel that has a key. And the key means basically that you find out who the models are for each character, right? So character A will be modeled after a certain historical figure and so forth, right? This work has generally been read as a roman à clef, or an autobiographical work. What are the advantages and disadvantages of reading the work as direct autobiography and roman à clef? Alright, so anybody who looks into this issue will find that Mori Ōgai had similar experiences in Germany, and I think he actually did impregnate a German girl and was dating her for a while, but eventually he came back to Japan and left the girl on her own. So there are overlaps, but explain the advantages and disadvantages of reading it in that mode. Okay? And we should always be wary when reading works of literature in that mode. Number 4, discuss the theme representation of interracial sex in the work. I think I wrote a paper a long time ago when I was a graduate student about this theme of and representation of interracial sex in the work, right? Because in the 1890s there weren't a lot of works being written about this theme of interracial sex, which is what this work is. How is the story a reversal of Lotti and Puccini's Madame Butterfly? which premiered in 1887, so just a few years before this work. So it is very possible that Mori Ōgai had in mind Madame Butterfly when writing this, and that he sort of played with it and reversed certain aspects of it in this work. So in order to answer that, you of course have to look into Puccini's Madame Butterfly. You'll probably watch a few adaptations of it online if you find it. And finally, is this work a Bildungsroman? Bildungsroman, of course, is the German word. It's a type of genre of novel, a subgenre of novel, that traces the sort of moral and intellectual and emotional evolution or growth of a protagonist from his youth or her youth into adulthood. Japanese say seichō shōsetsu, I think is the word. Can this work be read as an example of a Bildungsroman? Yes or no, and explain your reasons. Alright, that concludes this commentary on the study guide for Mori Ōgai's classic work. By the way, all Japanese read this in high school, at least excerpts of the work, so most Japanese are familiar. It's been made into anime several times as well. I think a film adaptation came out too in the 1970s or 80s. You might be able to find that online. Okay, if you have any questions, email me. That's all for now. Bye-bye.